Hello and welcome to today's webinar on the Solicitors Qualifying Examination, SQE in short. My name is Paul Carter, I'm Policy Manager here at the SRA. Today I'll be joined by my colleague, Maxine Warr.
Hello.
Also Policy Manager here at the SRA. Today's webinar will update you on the work we've done so far, looking at how we assess legal skills as part of the SQE, share some of the questions we've been grappling with, and just as important, let you know how you can get involved in the discussions. So to start off with, Maxine, can you tell us how the legal skills have been assessed as part of the SQE1 pilot?
Yes, so I think most people already know that the SQE assessments are split into two, into SQE1 and SQE2. And in the pilot, we assess skills across both SQE1 and SQE2. In SQE1, we assess candidates in both their functioning legal knowledge, which is how they apply their legal knowledge in practice, and we also assess them in basic legal research and writing skills. And then in the SQE2 pilot, we assessed candidates across the full range of skills that they would need in order to qualify as a solicitor.
Yep.
So we assess them, for example, in legal research, legal writing, advocacy, client interviewing skills, for example.
Okay, so it begs the question, if we are testing the full range of skills in SQE2, why are we bothering testing them in SQE1?
Well, that's a really good question, because actually when we first started to design the SQE, we had originally intended not to assess skills in SQE1. We were originally going to focus SQE1 on testing functioning legal knowledge, and then SQE2 on testing practical legal skills. But when we started to talk to stakeholders and to employers in particular about this, they told us that they would prefer candidates to have had their basic legal skills assessed during SQE1, so that when they went into the workplace, they had those basic legal skills.
Okay.
And they also told us that that's how it works at the moment on the legal practice course. So at the moment on the legal practice course, candidates are given training in basic legal skills. And so employers told us if they weren't included in SQE1, that would be a backward step. So we listened to what people told us. We've worked together with Kaplan and we designed an assessment of skills for inclusion in SQE1. But I think one thing that's really important to note about the skills assessment on SQE1, well certainly the assessment that we piloted, is that it wasn't set at the same level as the other SQE assessments. So all of the other SQE assessments are set at the level of a competent day one solicitor, because it's a national licensing exam. But for the SQE1 skills pilot assessment, we set it at a lower level because it was assessing basic legal skills. It was assessing the legal skills that you would need in order to start in the workplace. So it was set at a lower level.
I see. And did we encounter problems with the skills being set at a lower level than the threshold standard?
Well, yes, actually we did, and that was one of the findings from the pilot. We're just putting a slide up now to show the level that we used for the skills assessment in the pilot. And the level was the threshold skills level to enable a candidate to work effectively in professional legal services in an unqualified capacity. And what we found in the pilot was that it wasn't clear exactly what was meant by that standard. We found that it could mean different things to different people. So, for example, depending on the type of firm that somebody worked in, or the type of practice area that they worked in, or the type of work that an unqualified person in that firm might do. And the risk is that if we took that model into the live assessment, that the assessors may interpret that standard in a different way, and clearly that would be problematic.
Yeah, I understand. Was that the only problem that we encountered in the pilot, or was there something else?
No, it wasn't the only problem that we encountered in the pilot. In fact, the main problem that we encountered with the skills assessment design in the pilot was that with a national licensing exam, it's really, really important that we have a model for the assessment that is consistent and fair and reliable and accurate. And we found, and basically what that means in really simple terms, when we talk about reliability and accuracy of an assessment, is it means that we have to be confident that that model is passing the right people and failing the right people. And what we found with the model that we took into the pilot is that there weren't enough assessments of the skills in SQE1 pilot to give us the data that we needed in order to ensure that we could confidently make those pass and fail decisions. And clearly that's not acceptable with a national licensing exam.
Okay, let's just talk about, for the moment, candidates from black, Asian and minority ethnic groups. I understand in the pilot they performed worse than candidates from other groups. Can you just tell us a little more about that?
Well, this is a really, really tricky question. So yes, we did analyse the data from the pilot by reference to certain groups, and we did find on the pilot that candidates from BAME groups did perform less well than candidates from white groups, from the white group when they were compared, even if we compared them against the assessments on functioning legal knowledge. But we have to be really, really careful not to overinterpret that data. There were lots of confounding variables to take into account, and also the sample size on the pilot was relatively small. So the results were inconclusive, but what it did tell us is that this is an issue that's really important. It's an issue that we need to monitor and evaluate in the live assessments.
Okay, and I understand that model won't be going forward into the live assessments.
That's correct. We won't be taking that model into the live assessment, and the main reason for that is because of the reliability and the accuracy problems that we had, as I've already explained.
So can you tell us what you are going to do?
Well, actually, we don't know yet what we're going to do, and that's why we want stakeholders to help us with this issue. We've spent the last couple of months talking to stakeholders. It's been really, really valuable work. We've talked to them about a range of different options, and through that work, we've now narrowed it down to 2 particular options, and we would like stakeholder views on these 2 options. I think we're just putting a slide up now to show what the 2 options are. So the first option is we think it is possible to still design a skills assessment for SQE1, which could be accurate and reliable. But in order to do that, what we would have to do is to add a legal writing assessment to each of the functioning legal knowledge assessments. And if we did that, there would be one single pass-fail mark across both the skills and the functioning legal knowledge. And also, the skills assessment side of it would count for 10% of that mark. And the other thing that we would have to do to make sure that this was a valid and reliable assessment is that the skills element would have to be set at the same level as the functioning legal knowledge assessment. So rather than setting it at the lower level, which we did in SQE1 pilot, it would have to be set at the same level. So it would have to be set at the level of a competent day 1 solicitor.
Okay.
So we think it is possible to do it, and that's the model that we would propose.
And option 2?
And option 2 is that we remove skills from SQE1 altogether, and we assess the full range of skills in SQE2. And I think it's worth just being clear that if we did that, candidates would still be assessed in the full range of skills that they need in order to qualify as a solicitor. So no one would pass as a solicitor without having the full range of skills assessed, even if they weren't assessed in SQE1.
Okay, so just focusing on option 1 for the minute, why with this option would we not encounter the same reliability and accuracy issues that we did in the SQE1 pilot?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. And the reason why we wouldn't encounter the same problems is because the problem with the SQE1 pilot is that there were a very small number of assessments in the skills, and the skills assessments were separate from the functioning legal knowledge assessments. But if we combine the skills assessment with the functioning legal knowledge assessment, it will give us enough data to ensure the reliability and the accuracy of the assessment. So that's how we would do it.
Aha. But people will say, could a candidate not pass this assessment by failing or doing poorly in the skills part and doing really well in the FLK part and walk away with a pass?
Yes, you're absolutely right. In theory, somebody could fail the skills part of the assessment and still pass the functioning legal knowledge part of the assessment, but still pass overall. And when we've been out and about talking to employers, some employers have said to us that would be a concern if we went ahead with that model for the assessment. And they've asked us whether, if we did go ahead with that model, whether we would be able to provide a breakdown of the skills and the functioning legal knowledge marks. And that's something that we're looking at.
Okay. And just one other thing to pick up on, you mentioned that in option 1, the skills would be set at the level of the threshold standard of a day 1 competent solicitor, which was different to it being at the lower level before. Yeah. But with that, are you not double assessing because you're also assessing the same skill in SQE 2 as well?
Well, that's right, yes. It would mean that there's some duplication. So we would be assessing legal research and writing both in SQE 1 and in SQE 2. The advantage, of course, would be that with SQE 1, we wouldn't have the same problem that we had with how to interpret that lower level standard, because we know what the standard is for a day 1 solicitor. One of the disadvantages with a skills assessment in SQE 1, which is set at the level of a competent day 1 solicitor, is that some candidates may find it difficult to pass that assessment, particularly if they've not had work experience before they take SQE 1.
Okay. And as you say, you've just mentioned that adding skills to the assessment increases the cost. Option 2 doesn't have any skills, so surely if we went with that option, the assessment would be cheaper.
Well, yes, that's true. If we had no skills assessment in SQE 1, it would remove some cost from the SQE 1 assessment. The other advantage of removing the skills from SQE 1 would be that candidates would get their results quicker, because it's quicker to mark the functioning legal knowledge assessments than it is to mark the skills assessments.
Okay, thanks Maxine. So these 2 options are what you're seeking stakeholder feedback on?
Yes, that's right. And in order to do that, we've designed a survey which will be sent out to everybody who's signed up to this webinar at the end of the session. And also we'll put a slide up at the end which can tell people how they can also access that survey.
Okay, thanks. So that concludes looking at the issues that we're grappling with SQE 1. So if we move on to SQE 2 and its design and the issues we're looking at there, but before we do so, can you just explain to us again why with SQE 2 we don't encounter the reliability and accuracy issues that we did with this legal skills in SQE 1?
Well, as I've already explained, the problem with the skills assessment on SQE 1 was that there weren't enough assessments to give us the data that we needed in order to make sure the assessment was reliable. So we don't anticipate that we would have the same problem with the SQE 2 skills assessment, because we're assessing the full range of skills, and so we need a larger number of assessment points in that assessment. Yep. So, for example, in the SQE 2 pilot, candidates were asked to take 14 different assessments. And we're looking at whether that's the right number, but we know that it will be in that region. And because there will be more assessments on SQE 2, we anticipate that it will be possible to design a reliable and accurate assessment.
Okay, so that issue's gone, but there is another issue that you're looking at. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so the issue that we want stakeholder feedback on in SQE 2 is whether we require all candidates to take exactly the same exam. So they would take the same exam covering all of the skills needed to qualify as a solicitor, and they would take those assessments across all the contexts, all the 5 contexts that we've already identified at the start of the webinar. Or the other option is that we give candidates some choice of the context in which they take those skills assessments, and that's the issue that we're trying to grapple with at the moment.
Okay, so what model did you take into the pilot?
So for the pilot, we actually took in a model that combined both of those things. So the SQE 2 pilot model was essentially split into 2, and for the first part of the assessment, all candidates took exactly the same assessments. So they were assessed in all skills across the all 5 contexts. And then for the second part of the assessment, candidates were given a choice. So they were assessed in all of the skills again, but they were given a choice about the context in which those skills were assessed. And for the purposes of the pilot, the choice was between criminal law and business law and practice.
And I understand you chose that model for a reason. Can you just tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so the reason that we chose that model was because it enabled us to test 3 different options. So it enabled us to test a model where candidates all take the same exam, a model where candidates have some choice, or a model which is a combination of those 2 things.
And I'm thinking, presumably from a regulatory perspective, all candidates taking the same assessment would surely be better and fairer, would it not?
Yes.
Than giving them a choice?
Yeah, of course. It's much more straightforward to design an accurate and reliable and fair exam where everybody takes the same assessment. But we are, through the pilot, looking at whether it's still possible to design a fair, accurate, reliable assessment while still giving candidates some choice.
So why did you give them the choice in the pilot? Was there a reason behind that?
Yeah, so the reason that we're looking at whether it's possible to give some choice is because when we've been out talking to employers about the SQE2 assessment, some employers have said to us that if all candidates were required to all take the same assessment across all 5 contexts, that some employers may find it difficult to provide work experience across all of those 5 contexts. And of course that could be a problem because it might deter employers from taking on trainees. And the other problem is that it may mean that candidates then feel that they have to go into the classroom to take top-up training in order to prepare themselves for SQE2. And of course any classroom training is going to come with a cost, and cost is something that we're very mindful of in the SQE.
Okay, so everyone taking the same assessment, or people are referring to it as the common core, or a specialist area that they could take, or a mixture of both. These are the issues you want stakeholders to get involved with and provide feedback for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've included some questions also in the survey, as I mentioned. And we're particularly interested in this point on hearing from employers about how those different designs that we've talked about for SQE2, how they might affect employers' decisions about recruitment and training of trainee solicitors.
And when the survey results come in, what are the next steps? What do you plan to do?
Well, clearly we need to wait for the results of the SQE2 pilot. But once we've got those, we'll look at the feedback from stakeholders. We're also doing a lot of other activities to talk to stakeholders about all of these issues. We'll look at all of that and then we'll make a final decision about the design both of SQE1 and of SQE2. And we hope that that will be sometime in June or July this year.
Okay, well, thank you to Maxine. Very useful information. To conclude, there are some slides with useful links on for you. One in particular will give you a link to the new SQE bulletin, which is a monthly bulletin, which you need to subscribe to get access to. It is free. And then finally, you will see the slide for the link to the survey, where we hope you can get involved in the discussion and provide feedback on the issues that we looked at for SQE1, legal skills, and also for SQE2. Thank you for listening.